Hello everyone, this is day 4 of my video journal series. Today's date is the 12th of February and it is a Thursday, and something that's been on my mind today are trains. I personally like trains. I think they're neat, efficient, they carry a lot of things, they carry a lot of people, freight. They're very multi-purpose. This little thing I got here, I got from the Bathurst Railway Museum last year when I was in Bathurst. It's like a mini pencil sharpener in the shape of a train. It also functions as a mini toy, but you can see, I don't know if you can see at the back, but it's got like a mini pencil sharpener in there. You can put the pencil in the bottom, sharpen your pencil. Very cool. I just keep it on like my nightstand. Sometimes I like playing around with it, but that's besides the point. So yeah, trains. I've always thought, trains are pretty cool. They do a lot of stuff. They're very efficient, and that's why I like catching them. I don't really drive, really. If I want to go out to the city or go out to the neighboring suburb, I usually just catch a train, walk to my local train station because I don't really like driving, and I really much like public transport. And luckily in Sydney, we do have decent public transport. We have fairly frequent train services near where I live. And the cool thing about where I live in Sydney is that we got double decker trains. Most of our fleet are double deckers. At least the electric suburban fleet. Sydney Metro and the regional trains are all single deck, but the intercity and suburban electric trains are all double decker, which is really cool. Um, Elsewhere in the world, they got all different types of trains. In fact, Sydney's train network kind of reminds me of Switzerland, where it's all double decker, and to some extent Amtrak, even though Amtrak's like more regional. And I guess Swiss Rail is also more regional. Well, I mean, like regional or intercity. I guess it sort of connects all the cities in Switzerland together. And I guess Switzerland's a quite small country, so could you call it intercity or would you call it regional rail? I'm not quite sure. But to come to think about it, there's not many other places I can think of that have double decker trains, which is quite peculiar. I know Melbourne experimented with double decker trains with the 4D, which was a prototype double decker train based off the Tangara model, and that one was just a single unit that they made in the 90s and was quickly scrapped afterwards. I think the UK also experimented with double decker trains for a bit, but it didn't really work out. So, yeah, those are the only places I can think of that have double decker trains: Switzerland, United States, Australia, maybe some other countries around the world if I'm not 100% sure. Oh, Japan. Japan, I knew had double decker Shinkansen trains, and some of the trains on the Tokyo suburban fleet, they are double decker, but it's quite rare, and usually it's like a few carriages, not the like entire train. Um, yeah, and I like double decker trains. I think they're really neat. I like always sitting at the top, but on the Tangaras, the annoying thing about sitting on the top is that it lacks like a mini. It sounds really weird saying this, but it lacks like this mini footrest sort of area. Because when you sit on the bottom deck, I noticed when you sit on the bottom deck, there's like this like thing on your right or left hand side, depending where you're sitting. It's like a mini like middle bar, and I like just putting my leg on that because it's like really comfortable in that position. But on the top deck, they don't have like this mini middle bar on the floor. It's just like completely flat, so you have to like sit like this, and you can't really like lean your elbow on the window because the frame's not thick enough, which kind of annoys me. But on the not Waratah, on the Oscars, which are the intercity trains that run in the towards Wollongong, the Illawarra line, and they're rolling them out on the suburban network as well. Just suburban only trains, which is pretty cool. Those ones they have like an actual footrest you can put your feet on, and they actually got thick enough window borders where you can put your elbow and rest. I like those ones to ride better than the Tengaras, which is a little bit of a controversial opinion. But yeah, and another interesting fact about trains. that I learned was that China produced its very last steam train in the year 1999, which is incredibly late for steam trains. Like, come to think about it, I can't think of any other nation on Earth or any other city on Earth that was really using steam trains at the time. I know there's some countries around the world that still use them, but it's very peculiar because China now has a high-speed railway network that's like a behemoth. 20 years ago, they only had like, I don't even think they had high-speed rail up until 2007. And within a span of 20 years, they've now got, I think, one of the world's largest high-speed rail networks by track length. Put into perspective, China produced its last steam train in 1999. And from what I read about on Wikipedia, the very last mainline passenger steam train service was in the year 2005, a few months before I was born. So between 2005 and 2007, 2005 being the last mainline passenger steam rail service, and 2007 being, I'm pretty sure, the commencement of high-speed rail, like a very small stretch of it, within 2 years they phased out nearly all of steam and introduced high-speed rail. Like, what a jump, you know? And from what I've read also, I'm pretty sure they didn't fully stop using steam trains up until 2024, which was 2 years ago. Come to think about it, it's like really weird that a country has like high-speed rail at the same time was also using steam train for like freight until like a few years ago. It's really weird to think that, but honestly, like, it's such an amazing and just like like just such like an amazing and stark contrast of like how history and time works. You think like by now we would have had high speed rail in Australia. Well, now we don't have high speed rail in Australia. The time it has taken for Australia to bake high speed rail, the French have already built the TGV, the Japanese have already expanded the Shinkansen. The Chinese have already built their national high-speed rail network, but we haven't even got a single kilometer of track. You know, like the Japanese, they started building theirs in the 60s, the French in the 70s and 80s, and the Chinese, they did their whole thing in like less than 20 years. They managed to phase out steam trains, and less than 2 years, like nearly phase them out, and nearly 2 years later, introduce high-speed rail. But I yearn to see the day where we can, get high-speed rail here in Australia, at least between Sydney and Newcastle. I have heard that the federal Labor government established a high-speed rail authority here in Australia, and they are planning on constructing a high-speed rail line from Newcastle to Central Coast by, I believe, 2037, and then Central Coast to Sydney Central by 2041 or around that time. So it will be quite a while, around 2041 or around there. Yes, so it'll be around 15 years before we can get potentially a high-speed rail line between Sydney and Newcastle. But look, I'll be pretty excited if there's any high-speed rail in Australia. I'll be really excited if they build a line to Canberra and to Melbourne, because I've taken the train to Melbourne and it is a painful experience in even just standard class, even in the sleeper cabins. I've only really done like economy class, but you're forced into these seats, which are okay. They're okay comfort-wise, but they're like 40-year-old XPT trains, and the whole journey takes around 11 hours, which is, for a distance which only takes around maybe at most an hour by flying, it really isn't economical. It's only really worth the experience. But I've heard that if there were high-speed rail between Sydney and Melbourne, that it will actually bring travel times down by like to, I'm pretty sure, like 3 or a max 4 hours, which actually make it somewhat competitive with flying. And I even heard if they even altered the pre-existing track on the network and just ran the XPTs at full speed, it'll already save like a bunch of hours, already shave off a bunch of hours off the current time. So instead of 11 hours, it'll be like 4 or 5 hours, which is, still pretty reasonable. So I definitely, you know, want to see some improvement made towards our country's regional rail infrastructure, because it is, quite lacking. Our suburban trains are okay, but, for regional rail, it is quite poor. And I think that just needs to be a priority. I think a lot more people now are starting to take trains, public transport, because it has gotten a little bit better. But, with regional rail, I think, you know, there needs to be some improvement, at least here in Australia. I've seen other, countries. I've been to Japan before. Their rail infrastructure and networks are, some of the best in the world. And, I wish we can just have a little bit of that. Like, how cool will it be if I can just hop on a train in Newcastle and be there in like less than an hour? If I want to hop on a train to Canberra, you can do it in like 1 or 2 hours. Because, or even like an hour, yeah, they're roughly the same distance. And that means, you can live far away, you can live along the Central Coast, and you can easily commute to work in less than an hour, you know? And that'll mean, we can construct more homes along those rail corridors, or we can, push people outside a little bit of the major cities. I wouldn't mind living on, you know, Central Coast. I wouldn't mind living in a somewhat, not rural, but less urbanized area if I have access to a train station that can take me to my job in like an hour. Honestly, it will be such a good thing. And I'm quite excited for the future of transport in not only my city, but throughout the country. And, I always wonder what, like, our future of our rail infrastructure or railway network is going to be in 20 years. You know, like whenever there'll be high speed rail or expansion of Sydney Metro or other train lines or regional rail. I'm honestly, quite excited to see improvements to be made. Um, and yeah, I don't know what the before I like end on it, I don't know what the model of this train is. I have heard that it is. I've got the model name. It doesn't say over here; it just says made in China. Yeah, I'm pretty sure this train has a very specific model name. I forgot what it's called, but it's I think one of the earliest, not earliest, but it's like one of the more earlier models of steam trains there are. Um, and my favorite train, come to think about it, what is my favorite train? Well, I have to say the Sydney V or K sets. I know the V sets were recently withdrawn from revenue service, but I love those trains. They always had like the very nice vinyl seats. I think they have the best seats on the entire network. The K sets, they're still in service for now, as of 2026. Those ones are, I think, like second place. Because they have like very nice seats, and they just got like a cool, cool retro vibe to them. Which is, I think, like, as good as like stuff like Sydney Metro is and the new fleet of trains that's coming out. Like, I do kind of miss the aesthetics of the old trains. Sometimes I think they got actually a little bit better seating because I really like vinyl seating. I think this couch is vinyl. Definitely feels like it. And yeah, I'm just excited to live in a city where we have very nice double-decker trains, even if our train network constantly breaks down because of weekend track repair, where they have to get out the old replacement buses, which everyone loves. But that's all I really have to say about trains, and that's all I have to say about today. I'll see you guys tomorrow.